charges do you have in your history?
2.
2. And you're selling heroin?
Yes, sir. I have no excuse for it besides I was being stupid, trying to make money.
Whenever I see something that has happened in the news, my first reaction is to say, please God, don't let this person have been someone that we released on parole. Did you fight with a 9-month pregnant ex-girlfriend?
All I did was just, not push her, but moved her to another room.
Someone is going to get out. They're going to finish their sentence. They're going to be on parole and do something heinous. It's going to happen. We're dealing with human criminals. Why did you have a gun on December 28th?
I thought my life was in danger. I just didn't want anything to happen to me.
The ones that are low risk, those are easy. It's the ones in the middle that can go either way, where you sit and think, oh, if the planets line up just right, will this guy kill somebody?
The American criminal justice system enforces our laws and keeps watch over us. But who is watching the system? I'm Joe Berlinger, and I've used my camera for 20 years to knock down doors and pursue the truth. Now we're going inside the American criminal justice system. From law enforcement to elected officials, the court system to corrections, to find out if justice is being served. The United States incarcerates 2.2 million people, a higher percentage of its citizens than any other country in the world. But only 5% of prisoners will remain behind bars for life. The majority will be released back into the community. While some of these offenders will serve their full sentences in prison, others will be granted parole.
People who go out on parole and serves the last part of their sentence in the community under supervision of the parole board.
Hey, Mr. Ramos, I'm going to make a motion to parole you for March 8th, 2015.
And people with parole supervision have a much lower recidivism rate than people who wrap up behind the wall.
In this episode of The System, we'll examine how state parole boards decide which prisoner is a threat to public safety and which will become a functioning member of society. We start this episode in Connecticut, where the parole system has undergone an overhaul to improve its procedures. Across the street from this historic Waterbury Park, the parole board is gathering for a hearing. They agreed to give us an inside look at how they operate. So tell me what's going on today.
Okay, so
What's happening?
The process you're about to observe are, we're going to do 2 revocation hearings. First, this is not a live hearing, so inmates appear, obviously, by video.
Family members are allowed to attend these hearings and are conferenced in from another facility in New Haven, Connecticut.
These inmates that you'll be seeing are asking for early release on discretionary parole.
Erica Tyndall was appointed as the chair of the Connecticut Parole Board in 2011. She and her staff oversee an average of 40 cases per week.
We sit in panels of 3, and it's by majority vote, so you need 2 people to agree to either release or not. We have lots of information that we make our decisions on. Pre-sentence investigation reports, police reports, letters of support, letters of opposition, what victims may have said at the sentencing, what the statements the defendants made.
This hearing is being conducted in consideration of the parole application for Alvin Crawford. He is serving a sentence of 3 years, with 3 years probation to follow, for criminal weapon possession and no pistol permit.
For 29-year-old Alvin Crawford, this hearing is a chance to prove that 8 months in prison was enough to change his ways. But the parole board has to balance his claims against the public safety of all of the state's citizens.
Mr. Crawford, it is now your opportunity to express to the board why you believe you should be granted parole at this time.
I feel I should be given a chance at parole because I earned my spot. I'm in a program now, and I accept full responsibility for my actions. I have a family out there, I have 2 children, desperately need me, and I need them more. I just can't raise a family from here. I need to get home.
I want you to try to explain to me, why did you have a gun on December 28th?
I thought my life was in danger, like being around people, and I just didn't want anything to happen to me.
Were you drinking?
That night, yes, I was.
Were you supposed to be?
No.
You were on the right track at one point. What happened? You were working 11 months this last time.
Just poor decision making with the choices that I made, the group of people I surrounded myself with.
And you're asking us for a second chance, right?
Yes.
But you were given a second chance. That's the reason for the probation.
Yes, Mr. Crawford, I'm not sure why you didn't learn from your last incarceration there. You were involved in a serious case, the stabbing.
Do you think there's ever an acceptable time to put your hands on someone else?
Oh, no, never.
What if they're in your face? What if they're saying terrible things about your kids, about your fiance? Is there ever a time that's acceptable for you to put your hands on her?
No. No, never.
Okay, Mr. Crawford and family, stand by. We're going to deliberate about your case, and then we'll come back on the record and take a vote, okay?
Our cameras were not allowed inside while the board deliberates on its decision. Like all parolees, if Crawford is granted parole, he will serve the remaining part of his sentence outside of the prison walls. In Massachusetts, 59-year-old Donald Perry has been stuck in the system for over 30 years. After pleading guilty to multiple armed robberies, Perry received a life sentence in 1983.
I remember doing a stint in maximum security segregation for almost 3 years. You're locked in a cell 24 hours a day. I'm being treated like an animal. I got to the point where I realized that, that's doing a total disservice for me. What's important to me is on the other side of that fence, and how do I get to the other side of that fence?
Eventually, Perry got to the other side of that fence. In 2001, after serving nearly 19 years of his life sentence, Perry was granted parole. Once on the outside, Perry turned his life around. He graduated from college and spent the next 11 years employed as an advocate for the homeless, finding them housing and managing a soup kitchen.
Donald was somebody who was, by all accounts, doing extraordinarily well, who was contributing to his community. He was sitting on boards with elected officials, and he had the support of the mayor of Northampton, the chief of police of Northampton, and countless citizens who had just seen him extend himself to the least fortunate and most vulnerable members of the community.
A letter of recommendation from the mayor of Northampton said, Mr. Perry used the circumstances of his imprisonment and parole to forge a new life for himself and better the community he works in. Then, on August 3rd, 2011, Perry was arrested on his way to work when a state trooper found stolen goods in his SUV. Perry insisted the iPad and other items were left behind by a homeless hitchhiker he was driving to a shelter.
When Donald got picked up that day, I really honestly believed, okay, so we get a lawyer, we clear this up, and you come home. And I really didn't realize the impact that it would have, especially since he didn't do anything. So how could they hold you?
At trial, a jury found Perry not guilty of receiving stolen property. But because he was on parole at the time of the arrest, he was charged with a parole violation and returned to prison.
The Massachusetts Parole Board decided that, notwithstanding that acquittal, that he was nevertheless in violation of his parole for reasons that I still have a hard time understanding.
Despite his acquittal, the parole board was able to revoke his parole and keep Perry in prison. It would be months before he had a chance to be heard again by the parole board. Just across the state border in Connecticut, the parole board has just reached a decision regarding inmate Alvin Crawford.
And we are back on record in the case of Alvin Crawford, number 286825.
We make decisions every day that affect every man, woman, and child in the state of Connecticut. And sometimes the cases are not so clear-cut. The high-risk offenders, the ones that make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, those are easy. Those are the ones where you just know, okay, put him under the prison. He should never, ever see the light of day. The ones that are low risk, those are easy. It's the ones in the middle that can go either way, where you sit and think, oh, if the planets line up just right, will this guy kill somebody? Hey, Mr. Crawford, I'm going to make a motion to deny you parole with no new hearing. Your denial is for the following reasons.
Your criminal history, the current offense was committed while on probation, and inadequate institutional programming.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good luck to you, sir.
Any quick word about that decision?
High risk, high stakes. He will hurt somebody. He started his criminal career with an assault. He nearly stabbed some kid to death over a bicycle. In the Department of Correction, we have a person who follows security risk groups, gangs, and Mr. Crawford runs with this group. So he's someone that's very, very risky to take.
Left on his sentence.
No more than a year and a half.
It's scary he's getting out of that anyway.
And he's getting out. Right. They don't have life sentences or the death penalty. They are coming home.
Hello, Moto.
Do you want to design a new room but don't know where to start? At Raymore and Flanagan Outlet, you can discover your style.
After spending 14 months in prison for a crime that a jury determined he did not commit, Perry is once again in front of the parole board. A month after his parole hearing, Perry is informed of the board's decision. Despite his acquittal for receiving stolen property, the parole board revoked Perry's parole, forcing him to resume the life sentence he received for crimes he committed over 25 years ago.
No explanation, it was just denied. Feel like I wind up in the Alice in Wonderland fairy tale, like my life went right down the rabbit hole. I wind up being thrown back in the midst of what I had worked so long to try to get away from. Prison is insane.
Today, there are over 800,000 prisoners who have been released on parole in the United States.
We can say we're not going to worry about them, and we're going to continue to pay for that through increased police, through increased courts, and we're going to continue to have a correctional system that's just going to be a revolving door, a very expensive revolving door.
In 2008, Connecticut passed a series of criminal justice reforms to improve their parole system. We meet with William Carbone, an expert on parole who has worked in the system for over 15 years. He is currently on staff at the Henry C. Lee College of Criminal Justice in New Haven, Connecticut.
I think the current administration's approach to public safety in general has been very smart. They have attempted to invest in what's called recidivism reduction. And they have invested very heavily in trying to improve the information sharing so that what we know about any offender is available to the people who have to make a decision. An important decision like the decision to release. So now that old paper system has been replaced with something called the Judicial Electronic Bridge. And so they are available at all stages of the corrections process and the parole process.
Change can come at a price. This and other innovations were introduced only after a triple rape and murder by parolees stunned the quiet New England town of Cheshire, raising serious questions about the competence of the Connecticut parole system.
Police say the suspects entered the Pettit house as the family was sleeping. The mother was raped and strangled. The 11-year-old daughter also sexually assaulted. Both girls were eventually tied to their beds, doused with gasoline, and set on fire.
When people found out that both Hayes and Thomas Rajewski had recently been on parole that only had been let out relatively recently, that just made it worse.
Dave Altamari is a crime reporter for the Hartford Courant who covered the infamous Cheshire murders and subsequent trials of Stephen Hayes and Joshua Komisarjevsky.
Hayes was really a two-bit criminal. He had been arrested 20-something times, He had been in jail the last time, literally for stealing purses out of cars. Joshua was a little different story. He was a burglar. He liked to break into people's houses at night while they were home. He used to use night goggles when he broke into people's houses, and sometimes he literally would watch people sleeping. At the time of the sentencing, the judge had called him a cold, calculated predator.
In 2007, after serving 3 years of a 5-year sentence for burglary, Stephen Hayes was granted parole.
He actually told people in the halfway house that he was amazed that they had given him parole, given how many times he had been in and out of prison.
As for Commissar Jeffsky, he was 4 years into his 9-year sentence before he was released on parole. Because of a tragic bureaucratic oversight, the parole board never received his original trial transcript.
Transcripts are expensive, and the state didn't want to pay to have all these transcripts for every single parolee go to the board. So when Josh appeared before the 3 members of the parole board at that time, they had no idea what the judge had said. They had no idea really what his history was, that it was burglary.
Hayes and Commissar Jeffsky would meet in a halfway house, and from there go on to commit one of the most heinous crimes in Connecticut history. The catastrophic decision to release these 2 inmates put pressure on the state to replace the parole board and re-examine its policies to better protect the public from paroled criminals. One of the primary goals of the parole system is to protect the lives of the public. But what happens if a parole board makes a decision which unfairly damages the life of a parolee? Donald Perry rebuilt a life centered on rehabilitation and community service, only to find it crumble when the parole board decided he belonged back in prison. We head to Springfield, Massachusetts to meet Holly Richardson, a community activist who is leading a campaign to free Donald Perry.
We were all surprised as community people when he was acquitted in July that he didn't go home. And then initially we thought, okay, well, he was a parolee and there must be some paperwork that has to be done. And each step of the way, as it kept happening, that he was not going to be coming home and that he didn't get re-paroled. I mean, we couldn't even believe it.
The perceived injustice of Donald Perry's case created a groundswell of support. A petition created to free Donald Perry received over 150,000 signatures.
People that I didn't really know, or even some people I knew from work a little bit, really rallied for me and really rallied for him.
Elaine Arsenal is a social worker and Donald Perry's life partner. What should people know about Donald's story?
You know, he's basically a poster child for what a person should do on parole. And he has reinvented himself from what he was like in his 20s. The way he lives his life today is like, you know, he's honest, you know, he's caring, compassionate. He does nothing but give back to the community.
Tell me how this has affected your relationship.
It's actually brought it stronger. You know, like when this all happened, there was a lot of shame for me because, you know, I didn't tell a lot of my friends and family he was on parole, and then it being public in the newspaper, it was really difficult for me because, like, oh, you know, now it's all out there. And I've had to learn to just kind of hold my head up and be like, you know what, we're good people. You know, he's a good man, and he's my partner. He's like my soulmate, so we're in this together no matter what.
This call is from an inmate at a Massachusetts correctional institution.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, Joe, this is Donald.
Hey, Mr. Perry, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Tell me how you're feeling these days.
Feeling a little anxious and overwhelmed at the same time. After I had gone to court and was found not guilty, then I come back to prison and wind up being here all of this time.
Yeah. What do you want people to know about your situation? You know, what happened to you?
Well, I think people need to understand what happened with the incident of August 3rd.
I was on my way to a board of directors meeting. But as I'm pulling out of my driveway and getting ready to get onto 47, I see is this person who's standing out on the road, and he's stumbling, and I visibly know him. I see him in the suitcase. He asked me for a ride to the drop-in center, a place where people go in the mornings to shower, have breakfast. When he get in my truck, he got his backpack and 2 bags, which is kind of typical of people slipping around the woods. I happen to notice a bunch of state troopers on the highway. When I take the exit coming out of Northampton, I notice this dude is getting really fizzy. When we pull down at the light, he says, "I'm out of here, man." He just jumps out. And the next thing I know, the lights is on me to pull over. So when I pull over, the state trooper comes up on the side of my vehicle. He's saying, "Just step out the vehicle." I'm like, "Man, what are you talking about? What's going on here?"
It must have been a nightmare, I can only imagine.
It has been a total nightmare.
The morning of Perry's arrest, 2 homes had been broken into and robbed. The police were able to track the stolen goods, 2 iPads, a purse, and other items, to Perry's vehicle. Perry was immediately arrested and thrown in jail. Maintaining his innocence, Perry went to trial and hired Luke Ryan to represent him.
What the police, I think, attempted to do was to try to tie him in not only to these burglaries, but to other burglaries in that area. What eventually happened was they learned that the footprints and fingerprints that were found at the scene did not match Donald Perry's. So what eventually I think they came to realize is, all right, well, why don't we just stick with the easiest thing to prove, which is receiving stolen property.
Criminal defense attorney and prisoner advocate Patty Guerin believes the board's decision to revoke Perry's parole may be indirectly tied to another inmate serving a life sentence, Dominic Sinelli. Similar to what happened in Cheshire, Connecticut, the Massachusetts Parole Board released a career criminal, Sinelli, who went on to murder a police officer in a fatal shootout in December of 2010.
We see a tremendous failure of the parole system.
The resignation of 5 parole board members has everyone talking.
The governor fired those responsible for supervising Sinelli after he was released.
The result for Massachusetts was a tremendous drop in parole rates for 2011 and 2012, and that cost the state a tremendous amount of money. The new board was very, very reluctant to parole people, especially lifers, and hardly anyone received parole that first year after the Sinelli incident.
Despite Donald Perry's acquittal for receiving stolen goods in 2012, the parole board has kept him behind bars for almost a year. But in March of 2013, he is granted another hearing and another chance at parole.
You are now before the board today, sir, to determine if you should be re-paroled.
I think everyone in this room can agree you're a menace out there. At that time, back then. For that very reason, we have to cross our T's and dot our I's when it comes to giving you a fair and full hearing before you're re-paroled.
I'm truly sorry for the pain and trauma that I caused all of my victims. The more that I explored and defined my own humanity, the more remorseful that I became. The more that I was determined to, upon release, to be an asset to my community.
The parole hearing lasts 2 hours, and unlike the hearings we've seen in Connecticut, Perry won't get an answer that day. Back in his cell, Perry waits for the board's decision.
Everybody was psyched. He's going to get out soon. You know, this went good. And it wasn't until 8 months later that we got a decision.
Ants. They aren't afraid of sprays that only kill on contact.
Despite Donald Perry's acquittal for receiving stolen goods in 2012, the parole board has kept him behind bars for almost a year. But in March of 2013, he is granted another hearing and another chance at parole.
You are now before the board today, sir, to determine if you should be re-paroled.
Everybody was psyched. He's going to get out soon. You know, this went good. And then we waited for a decision, and every week I would go on the website. They post the decisions on the website, and I would look, and I would look, and I would look, and there was no decision. And it wasn't until 8 months later that we got a decision.
Whenever I see something that has happened in the news, my first reaction is to say, please God, don't let this person have been someone that we released on parole.
The blowback from the parole of Joshua Komisarjevsky and Stephen Hayes and the subsequent Pettit family murders forced the Connecticut Parole Board to change how they made decisions.
One of the major changes was that the legislature in Connecticut demanded that the parole board, the Department of Correction, and the Court Support Services Division, which handles probation in our state, collaborate to come up with a dynamic risk assessment system. We have used a system called SCORES. It's the statewide collaborative offender risk evaluation system. And it looks at criminogenic domains that are directly related to a person's risk.
The SCORES system uses a comprehensive questionnaire completed by offenders, which evaluates critical factors affecting criminal behavior, like criminal history and education. The data is analyzed to predict how likely a criminal is to reoffend.
I believe that had the board that was sitting at the time that the two men who committed the Cheshire murders were up for parole, had they been using a dynamic risk assessment system, the decisions would have been very different. I do not believe those two would have been released.
Each inmate up for parole today has been evaluated by the SCORES system.
This hearing is being conducted in consideration of the parole application for Walter Wright, number 212526. He is serving a sentence of 5 years flat for sale of heroin or cocaine by a non-dependent and a violation of probation utilizing the statewide collaborative offender risk evaluation system, SCORES. Mr. Wright's overall risk for recidivating is very high. Mr. Wright, it is now your opportunity to express to the board why you believe you should be granted parole at this time.
I would like to be granted parole because I've used these last 2 years to change a lot about myself, as well as reflect back on a lack of judgment that has led me to my current incarceration. I completely understand that I can no longer allow myself to pick up drugs to sell as a means of income support because I have no job or times have gotten hard. I sit here today not asking for my freedom, but what I feel is my last chance to get my life in order. Therefore, I'm asking the panel today to please grant me parole.
Mr. Wright, I want you to pretend for a second that you're sitting where I am, and what you have in front of you is someone who had several violations of probation, who was on probation when they sold drugs and ran from the cops this time, and who had a record of drug sales with stealing a firearm and assault thrown in there for more than 2 decades. Would you release that person early? You know as well as I do that you are not a good risk.
The SCORES system looks at family and social support as another indicator of an inmate's likelihood to reoffend.
My kids are so disappointed in me because I'm in and out of jail, whatever. I mean,
how many children do you have?
I have 9.
And how many mothers of those children?
8.
That's a lot of work, that right there. That's a lot of stress and drama and work. Okay. This time I'm going to make a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing confidential inmate information. Before, parole boards were making decisions based on gut. If you make decisions in that way, you're only right half the time, about 50%, no better than chance. However, if we anchor our decisions in science, if we look at what the research says, it goes up to 70 or 80% of the time you can be right. I don't know who wouldn't raise their hand to be right 7 or 8 times out of 10 as opposed to 5. Okay, Mr. Wright, I'm going to make a motion to deny you parole. We're going to rehear you in October of 2015, and your reasons for denial are the following.
The current offense was committed while you were on probation. You have inadequate institutional programming to date, and a prior poor performance while on community release.
as much as you have control over, try to get into those classes and get something out of it. So when you come back to the board, you can actually articulate what you've learned and come up with some sort of plan for what you're going to do with yourself when you get out. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Good luck to you.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a nice day.
All right.
After being in prison for almost 2 years, Donald Perry once again went before the parole board and has to wait an additional 8 months before a decision is made about being re-paroled.
I'm not exactly sure what his role was, but in some way he was connected to breaking into neighbors' houses. And the parole board can't tolerate that.
We meet with Josh Wall, the chair of the Massachusetts Parole Board, which oversaw Donald Perry's hearing.
The first thing I would say about the fact that Mr. Perry had a not guilty verdict, but that the parole board revoked his parole, is that this is not a situation that is unusual.
Parole boards operate under a different standard than a court of law, yet the consequences of their decisions can be equally devastating. There's no prosecutor trying to prove a defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Instead, all the parole board needs to establish is that the preponderance of evidence proves that Perry could have committed the crime.
The important pieces of evidence are that Mr. Perry had the iPad, and he's being followed by the police. And when he's pulled over, there is no hitchhiker, there's no other person that is seen. And then Mr. Perry does not say when he's pulled over, oh, by the way, I had a hitchhiker. He doesn't say that.
I asked Perry why he never mentioned the hitchhiker to police, and he explains his previous experience with law enforcement had taught him to remain silent and ask for a lawyer.
When you put those pieces of information together, if you're experienced in these matters, like parole board members would be who have assessed situations like this, it wasn't a very difficult call to make.
After spending over 2 years in prison and then waiting 8 months for an answer from the parole board, Donald Perry finally received a decision on September 26, 2013.
One of the things that was important to our decision is that we did conclude that Mr. Perry does not present a current risk for violence. And I hope that we never hear about Mr. Perry again because he's successful.
Perry would be re-paroled, but not right away. Although the board did not consider Perry a threat to public safety, they added what Perry and his supporters considered a punitive measure by forcing him to remain in prison an additional year from the date of his parole hearing. According to the parole board's decision, no one on the panel believed Perry's side of the story.
When you think about Donald's account of what happened, the thing that I think was difficult for people outside the case to grasp is the first thing you hear is hitchhiker. I mean, who hitchhikes anymore? But the fact of the matter is, in Franklin County, behind Elaine's property, there is a significant seasonal population of homeless people. And this was Donald's professional life. So the fact that there would be a person on the side of the road with a couple backpacks, a garbage bag, that's Donald Perry's population that he serves.
With Amazon's low back-to-school prices, you can spend less on school supplies, backpacks.
After spending his final year in prison, Donald Perry will be released back into the community. Elaine, Perry's life partner, will pick him up from the Shirley Correctional Facility tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow will be the first day that he's been out in almost 3 years.
Did you do anything to prepare for his homecoming?
So I wanted to make sure that Donald had, new pillows and things like that. Like, all he talks about is how I get to sleep in my own bed. I get to sleep with my own sheets and my own blanket and, make sure all the towels are clean. Because those are really important things when you don't have good towels. Or you don't have, he's been sleeping on this little mat thing. you just can't get comfortable ever. And I think it might be him. Hello? I keep thinking this might be the last call I ever have to get from prison.
How you doing?
Yeah. Well, we're talking about what it feels like to be on the countdown here.
Overwhelmed, anxious, and a nervous wreck. There's too much adrenaline going, so I don't think I'm prepared to sleep.
Yeah. Well, tomorrow night you get to sleep in a real bed.
Let's hope that. I don't know how to act. I'll probably have to, sleep on the floor for like 3 days or something before I get used to the bed. No, just kidding.
Do whatever you want, as long as you're home.
That would be so great. I can't wait. I mean, as much normalcy back in my life as possible.
Yeah.
It's been a long 2 years and 8 months.
I know.
Ready?
I know. This is it. Okay.
The last phone call. All right, listen, I love you, and I look forward to seeing you.
I love you too.
All right.
Okay. Bye.
Hi. Big day.
Big day. Yeah. I didn't sleep much last night.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting. My adrenaline's been going.
First step is getting them out, so.
Yep. Let me grab his clothes.
An hour away, at the Shirley Correctional Facility, Donald Perry is waiting to be released. Elaine has allowed us to join her on the journey to reunite with her partner. We stop to pick up Holly Richardson,
Holly, you're the best!
an activist and friend who has advocated for Perry's release.
Yay! It's spring and Donald Perry's coming home. Today, we made a card for him. People signed it.
That's great.
Off we go. Donald's free.
Well, let's do it.
Let's do it.
How you feeling?
I'm sweating, and my mouth is dry at the same time.
All right, here we go.
Ready?
Yep.
We are at the Shirley Correctional Facility. Elaine is picking up her husband. We are not allowed in the prison.
So they said that they don't want any cameras on the premises at all, that everybody's going to have to leave.
So we're no longer on the prison grounds. We had to leave. The prison asked us to leave. It's been very frustrating the entire way. We were denied permission to film Donald Perry in prison. We were denied permission to film him leaving prison. We thought we were okay by just being in the parking lot, and we were going to film him getting into the car, but even now that's been denied, and so we had to leave the prison. They didn't want any cameras around, and so we're pulled over about a half a mile from the prison.
A correction officer from the prison tracks us down while we're waiting for Perry to be released.
So now they're kind of freaking out that we were shooting at all, and so they're checking whether or not they can let us go.
Prison officials are concerned about our cameras, and despite being away from the prison facility, we're still technically on prison property and asked to leave.
All right, we can go.
Donald Perry has finally been released on parole. We meet Perry and Elaine at the side of the road.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
So glad you're out. So what are your thoughts? I mean, 3 years taken from you.
Well, I can get awfully upset when I start thinking about it. I think about, I think one of the things amazing, how naive that I was, you know what I mean? About they can just do this.
What I don't understand is if you're acquitted of a crime, how can the parole board still have jurisdiction over your life and to determine that you should be behind bars? That doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either. And just by the stroke of a pen of somebody's whim, I was thrown right back.
Yeah. So how was it?
Man, once I saw him come out that last locked door, I knew it was really going to happen.
Yeah. Right.
And I got them in the car.
So I'm concerned. How much trouble did you guys get in?
You know, I thought you were getting out and I was going in the slammer.
This is a hearing of the Connecticut Board of Pardons and Parole.
Back in Connecticut, a young inmate named Joshua Strachman has just entered the system.
Joshua is currently serving a sentence of 3 years for sale of hallucinogen narcotic.
Well, Mr. Strachman, why are you selling heroin?
Having a baby on the way and had to do something.
Had to do something. I mean, you're a young guy and you've never had a job. How about starting there? Why couldn't you look for a job?
People didn't want to hire me because I guess I dropped out. And they asked me why I stopped going to school.
Well, that's a good question. Why didn't you go to school? Why didn't you go back to school?
I was thinking about it, but I ain't had a chance to do it.
You didn't have the chance because you're out there selling heroin. How much money were you making?
Like $3,500 a week.
$3,500 a week? That's a lot of money. Where are you going to make that when you get out?
I'm not trying to do that no more. I'm trying to go to school, finish school, try to get a GED, get a nice job.
So you're in school now?
Yep, I want to start a whole new, better life. I want to be able to be here for my daughter, be here for my family.
It's a little more than bad choices and running with the wrong crowd with you. Weren't you selling drugs because you were helping your mom?
Help mom, help me.
Yeah.
Like I used to wear holy shoes going to school. People used to pick on me. Socks was dirty. Sometimes to be starving and not having food or stuff like that. And I went out, did what I did. I know it was wrong.
Your mom had 6 kids. She was by herself. Are you the oldest boy?
Yeah, the oldest boy.
Okay, Joshua, I want you to just sit tight and relax a little bit. We're going to deliberate about your case and figure out what we're going to do with you, and then we're going to come back on the record and take a vote, okay?
Bye-bye.
We are back on the record. Has the board reached a decision?
We have. So, Mr. Strachman, I'm going to make a motion to parole you for July 9th, 2014, and you're going to have the following conditions.
Sir, you are going to a halfway house in the Hartford area, okay? Also, your parole is going to be contingent upon you completing good intentions, bad choices. Do you understand all of those, sir?
Yes, sir.
The good intentions, bad choices, what we're trying to do is help with your criminal thinking. If it is true that you were selling drugs for 2 to 3 years before you got caught, that means you have that criminal thinking down pat, and you're really good at it. So your release is contingent upon finishing that. If you don't finish it, we're telling them not to let you out. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
If you were to get yourself some skills and use resources in the community, you'll be able to expand the opportunities that you have. You're only 22. There's hope for you. You can turn this around. Good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Tell me, why did you guys vote the way you did?
He didn't have an adult criminal history. This was his first adult arrest. And he is an offender that, if given the right programming and the right dosage with appropriate supervision, could actually overcome his risk.
Donald Perry has been caught in the system for over 30 years. Even though he was released from prison today, he'll remain on parole for the rest of his life. In Springfield, Massachusetts, Perry meets with his parole officer, who fits him with a GPS ankle monitor that he is required to wear.
My new accessory, I know y'all jealous. This is a GPS monitoring device. Anytime I'm in a building, and other than 45 minute intervals, I have to come outside so it can be connected. Unless I'm at home.
You have to wear that all the time?
Constantly, 24/7. No swimming, no baths. I can't submerge this.
So how long do you have to wear that for?
Right now, they're saying 3 years.
After getting out of prison, one of the first things Donald Perry wants to do is get a haircut in his old Springfield neighborhood where he grew up.
How you doing? Good. So, my name's Jamie. It's all right, Jamie. Once we got to Springfield, at that time, it was like 7 of us. As a little kid. My father was very abusive. I was developing like this real anger from all of the beatings. I basically gravitated to everything negative. I remember coming up as a youth, wishing that I had someone that would advocate for me. My job as an outreach worker was to always try to connect with people and see how I could serve them. Better. I like helping people. And for the past almost 30 years, I worked hard. Everything changed. So I started finding me. You know what I mean? And the more I found me, the greater I latched on to life.
Feel normal now?
Not normal.
Oh, it feels good, huh?
Not normal. Yeah. I'm back.
You're back.
I'm back.
I'm back. There's my guy.
Yeah.
I strive to treat the people on the screen or in person as human beings who have maybe, made some really terrible mistakes. A lot of them come from very tragic backgrounds. We have to understand the narratives of the persons that we're making the decisions about.
What Donald was able to do should be celebrated because his transformation is genuine, it is authentic, it is real, it's inspiring to people.
Thank you. Good to see you too, man. How you doing?
What are you doing, Lindsay? Good to see you.
So did you have a good first night back home? Did you have a nice bed? And was that pretty?
I loved being home in my bed, and one of the things that I was so excited, I was like a little kid at Christmas time. I woke up like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and I just couldn't believe it. It's like I wanted to know I wasn't dreaming. You know what I mean? I wanted to know that it's real.
Thank you one and all for being here and for helping all of us through this process. And this is a happy occasion. So thank you all.